What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix for week number 3 of the 2021 CFL season. We're going to get into talking about the quarterbacks here in this video. Week 2 was a rough week for many people when it came to CFL Fantasy, and the quarterback position was a big part of that, with only Cody Fajardo and Michael Riley putting you up over 20 points, and a lot of premium quarterbacks dropping less than 10 in week number 2. So week 3, we hope to see a bounce back from some of the top quarterbacks around the CFL. Let's take a look at some of the top options available at this position. And to me, there's 3 clear options that I'm considering here this week. I think out of the matchups, looking at the options available, there's 3 go-to options that you can't miss with. There's a couple I'm cautious on, and there's some, frankly, I'm just staying away from. So diving in straight into the premium picks that I think will put you up a lot of points this week, it starts off with Cody Fajardo of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Comes in at an $11,917 salary in CFL Fantasy, the highest in the game among quarterbacks, and rightfully so. He's, so far this season, is the league leader at QB when it comes to fantasy points a game, averaging 21.65, a 17.8 point performance against BC in week 1, where really Saskatchewan only put up half a game there. They didn't get much going in the second half, and then came out and put up 25.5 against Hamilton, in week number 2. The thing I really like about this matchup is, well, one, Fajardo is an incredible quarterback. He's been succeeding so far last season, this season. He hasn't missed a beat from 2019, and he's clearly showing, both with his arm and with his legs, that he can put you up points. And I really like the matchup as well with the Ottawa Red Blacks. That may bring hesitation for some, because look what they did to Edmonton in week 1, and the bad week Trevor Harris put up only 9 points against Ottawa's defense. But Ottawa's defense played lights out in that game. They were absolutely incredible. Big games from Avery Williams, 14 tackles. Abdul Kanay had a pick 6 and a couple other big plays there. I don't know if Ottawa can replicate that all season long, especially against this Riders team that has put up the most offensive points out of any team so far this season by a decent margin. So I really like the matchup of Fajardo. It's going to cost you a lot, but I think Fajardo against Ottawa this week, I would bank on him getting you back into that 20-point range once again this week, because I just don't think Ottawa's offense is going to get anything done again, and I don't know that the defense can carry the team to another win the way they were, which, if they can't do that, chances are they're letting some through, and Fajardo should pick up a couple touchdowns through the air and maybe another one on the ground that will help boost your fantasy stats for this week. Second option I really like, and this may actually be my leading option coming into week number 3, is Vernon Adams Jr. of the Montreal Alouettes. $10,585 salary, third highest among the quarterbacks. And what did he do in week number 2, his first game of the season? Put up a solid 19.3 points against the Elks. Nothing fantastic, nothing spectacular. He only had, I think, 211 passing yards or something in that range. 1 touchdown pass, I believe, and he got some yardage on the ground as well. But Vernon Adams Jr. is a guy that can put you up a massive football game. And I think the opportunity with the matchup this week against the Calgary Stampeders is rather juicy. It's one I'm salivating over personally, because you look at how Calgary's defense has performed this year so far and how quarterbacks have performed against them. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, 24.6 in week 1, and in week number 2, Michael Riley putting up 20.3. So back-to-back weeks over 20 points against Calgary's defense. They seem to be struggling this year. The offense has been stalling for the Stampeders as well, and looks like Bo Levi Mitchell might not even be playing this week, and so you'll have a rookie quarterback in Michael O'Connor. I could see Montreal's offense being on the field a decent amount, and if they're going to do that, Vernon Adams Jr. is going to be making some plays, and much like Fajardo, I think he picks you up a ton of rushing points. A lot of rushing touchdowns last season, a lot of rushing yards on top of what he can do through the passing game. So big upside to Vernon Adams Jr. for week number 3. And the third option to me is Zach Collaros of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, a guy I really didn't expect to have up here as one of my top fantasy options for this season, this early on in the year especially. I was hesitant on Zach Collaros coming into the year. We saw such a small sample size from him in 2019 after his injuries, but he did come back, and he hasn't lost the game yet in a Bombers uniform. And he really showed in week number 2 to me what he is fully capable of. Because the Bombers threw 40 pass attempts, which I have not seen them do in who knows how long. It's typically a run-heavy team. I do think they'll lean a little bit more on the run game maybe in week 3. So I'm a little more hesitant on Collaros than the other 2 options just because he's not a guy that will often put you up that 300-yard game anymore. He'll get you the touchdowns. That's really how he gets his point. 19 points in week 1, 17.9 in week 2. He does play the same Argos team again, which, so maybe, should we expect another point total around the same in another matchup with the Argos? Or are they going to make the proper defensive adjustments in week number 3 to shut Collaros down? I think they will a little bit, so I'm a little more tempered on Collaros. I see him hitting more maybe around the 15-point range, but the Bombers' offense is always good for a couple touchdowns each game, and if those are coming out of Collaros' hands, that's some points on the board for you. So his salary has jumped a ton, $10,658, is the second highest quarterback in the game now, behind Fajardo. So he's going to cost you to get you those touchdowns. So I think I like Vernon Adams Jr. If I had to rank them, Vernon Adams Jr., Cody Fajardo, Zach Collaros, that's kind of how I see the top 3 this week when it comes to the quarterbacks. So you're going to have to pay a premium, though, if you want to get one of those guys, is the problem. So what are some of the other options available out here? Well, the 2 I'm considering that are a bit cheaper, might save you a little bit money, but I'm very cautious on. Starts off with Michael Riley in BC. $9,622, so he doesn't save you a whole ton. But we know he's capable of being one of the top quarterbacks in the game. And there's obviously injury question marks around him, but he looked pretty darn good against Calgary in week number 2, putting up 20.3 points. Faces an Edmonton team that's been struggling so far this year. The reason, in a normal year, this would not be a caution point for me. This would be sign me up, put Riley in my lineup, sold. The problem is the confusing situation with BC's quarterbacks. We saw in week 1, Riley was listed as the starter. Then Rourke ended up starting the game. Then Riley came in the second half. We saw in week number 2, Rourke listed as the starter. Riley put in as the starter 20 minutes before game. So you could go and choose Michael Riley and he could put you up a 20-point week, or you could end up getting screwed over by this whole situation with the Lions again this week, and he is listed as the starter. It sounds like he's going to be listed as the number 1 starter on the depth chart this week. Sounds like he's actually been practicing, which is a good sign. But I'm kind of hesitant to go that direction because I don't want to get burned and all of a sudden have a guy that I'm paying $9,622 for that is not going to play. So take some caution with Riley. But hey, if you're a risk taker and you're certain that BC's going to start him, not a bad option if he does play the full game. He could put you up a premium point total in week number 3. The other one I'm interested in is Nick Arbuckle of the Toronto Argonauts. Now, at this point, as I record this on Monday evening, that we don't know who's going to be the starter for the Argos. I think it has to be Arbuckle. Bethel Thompson had a great game in week 1 against Calgary, put up 24.6, highest point total of the week, but had just 2.8 against this Bombers defense that he's facing again this week. So which Bethel Thompson is the actual one? Well, I think it's somewhere in the middle. And I think Arbuckle got a lot more going against the Bombers defense in that second half when he came into the game. And to me, if you're going off of that and you're playing the same team again this week, I think you got to ride Nick Arbuckle. He didn't have a fantastic game, but he moved things a little bit. He got a touchdown with that offense, handed off to John White, so it doesn't count for points for him. But I thought he completed some good passes there. It's a shortened season. I think the Argos are going to go in Arbuckle's direction in week 3 if he's healthy. So I say I put him as a cautionary, potential option here, $8,168. So he is one of the cheaper quarterback options available to you. But I am hesitant just because of what that Bombers defense did. Nobody through 2 weeks has put up a 300-yard game of offense, never mind passing against them. They've given up just 13 points through 2 weeks. It's hard to put up good fantasy totals against the Bombers defense right now, especially if you're a quarterback. So a potential option, I could see Arbuckle getting more familiar with that offense, and maybe he shows flashes of what he did against Calgary when he was in Calgary in 2019. So he could be an interesting value play this week. But, after being burned at the quarterback position myself the last 2 weeks, I like those high-priced options that are going to guarantee you the points more than I like taking a chance on a guy like Nick Arbuckle in week number 3. And finally, guys to stay away from. I think there's some of those quarterback situations that are up in the air. Bethel Thompson, for example, I'm staying away from him this week for that reason. Even if he gets in the lineup, how he played against Winnipeg last week, I really didn't like that game from him. Nathan Rourke, $5,000. I think stay away from him just because of the whole quarterback situation again with BC. I'd rather, if you're going to take a chance on which one starts, I'd take a greater chance on Riley. I think his ceiling's higher. With Rourke, you could get burned again as many did last week. And if he's in the lineup, I'm not expecting as high of a point total that it may be worth it. When you can save a lot of money at some of the other positions that we'll talk about in other videos throughout this week as well. So staying away from those guys. I'm staying away from Matt Nichols out in Ottawa. Only 70 passing yards in week number 1 against the Edmonton Elks. They got nothing going offensively. They needed their defense to carry the way. And I'm a little hesitant on Nichols for that reason. It looked like he was maybe nursing a bit of an injury in week number 1. I want to see what this offense is capable of. Sure, he'll save you a penny or two, $7,244. It's a guy you can take a chance on, but until we can see Ottawa put offensive yards and put offensive points on the board, you got to stay away from a guy like Matt Nichols, especially since, typically he's not a guy who in his time in Winnipeg very, very often put up a 300-yard passing game. He got his point totals off of touchdowns. And Ottawa's offense doesn't strike me as one that's going to put up a lot of touchdowns, especially against the Riders' defense after what we saw them do against the Ticats the week before. So staying away from Matt Nichols in Ottawa, and I think we got to stay away from the quarterbacks in Calgary this week. Bo Levi Mitchell, 4 interceptions, a career high last week, just 3.6 points, a letdown for many, including myself. 12.1 the week before, so averaging 7.85 points a game, not what you want from a guy like Bo Levi Mitchell, who's one of the elite passers in the league in any given season. And it looks like he's nursing a little bit of an injury. He may not play in week 3. It seemed like he was suffering an injury after week 1, played through the injury in week 2, and clearly wasn't looking right out there. So this could be the opportunity for young Canadian quarterback Michael O'Connor to get the start for the Stampeders. $5,000 in CFL Fantasy for a quarterback that maybe got in a couple plays with the Argos in 19. I know he got in a couple rushing plays, I think, this week, but really does not have the CFL experience as a starter. It's a risky pick at $5,000. It could reward you with those money savings, but Calgary has a myriad of issues this week and this season. I think it's beyond Bo Levi Mitchell. I think the receiving group they have there has not performed spectacularly. I think their defense has been struggling. And I think their week 3 matchup with the Alouettes is if that Alouettes defense can do what they did in week 2 against the Elks, I'm hesitant to go against them at quarterback. So I say stay away from Michael O'Connor until we can see him come out. Maybe get a start or two under him. If he shines well this week, maybe you look at him in week 4 if Bo's not ready to go. But I say stay away from any Calgary quarterback in week 3. So there are your quarterback options for the 3rd week of the season. Love Fajardo, Adams Jr., and Collaros. Cautionary on Riley and Arbuckle, and staying away from the rest of the group in week number 3. That's it for this video. We'll talk about the running backs next time and look through the best running back options for week number 3 here on the Canadian Football Fantasy Fix. Tune in next time. Do all the YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe. Leave me a review. What'd you like? What you didn't? I appreciate it. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.